Right beside the busiest highway on Minnesota's North Shore, a whole river throws itself over ledges of ancient lava, and most drivers never even slow down. This is the Beaver River at Beaver Bay, a chain of cascades tumbling through a dark rock gorge on its last run to Lake Superior. The town beside it is tiny, barely more than 100 people, yet it is the oldest continuously settled community on this entire shore. A sandpaper empire, a legendary mail carrier, and 1 billion years of geology all meet at this one bridge. Today, we walk down into the gorge and take the falls one ledge at a time. Stay with me, because this little stop has a bigger story than places 10 times its size. Let us get our bearings before we drop into the gorge. We are on the northwestern shore of Lake Superior in Lake County, Minnesota, about 50 miles up the coast from Duluth. Highway 61, the famous North Shore Road, runs the whole length of this coast, and it crosses the Beaver River right here at Beaver Bay. Two Harbors lies 24 miles down the shore behind us, and the mining town of Silver Bay sits just 3 miles ahead. The Beaver River comes down out of the wooded highlands and empties into a small protected bay that gave the town its name. Everything in this episode happens within a few miles of that bridge. The walk itself is short and steep, a fisherman's path more than a formal trail, dropping from the roadside down to the water. In July, the river is running at a friendly summer level, but you can read its temper in the rock, scoured clean and bare far above today's waterline. Spring snowmelt turns this modest stream into a brown torrent that fills the gorge wall to wall. That is the thing about North Shore rivers. They live two lives, quiet in summer and violent in April. The footing here is bedrock and boulder, so every step is a step on something very old. How old is where this story really begins. About 1.1 billion years ago, the middle of North America began to tear itself apart. Geologists call it the Mid-Continent Rift, a great arc of splitting crust that ran right through what is now Lake Superior. For millions of years, floods of molten basalt poured out of the widening crack, layer upon layer, building one of the thickest stacks of lava flows on the planet. Then the rifting simply stopped, and the continent healed, making this the deepest failed rift ever discovered, a scar that never became an ocean. The rock under your feet at Beaver River Falls is that ancient lava. Every ledge the river pours over is the edge of a flow that once glowed red hot. Look at the falls, and you are looking at a stack of those old volcanic layers, part of what geologists call the North Shore Volcanic Group. Each eruption cooled into a hard sheet, and where sheets meet, there are seams of weaker rock. A river exploits those seams the way water always does, plucking out the soft material and leaving the hard flow tops standing as steps. That is why so many North Shore waterfalls look like staircases rather than single clean plunges. The Beaver River drops through exactly that kind of stairway here, ledge after ledge under the highway bridge. It is erosion reading a billion-year-old book one page at a time. Here is the main show, whitewater breaking over shelves of dark volcanic rock just downstream of the bridge. Notice the color of the water, stained the shade of strong tea by tannins from the cedar and spruce swamps upstream, a natural signature of almost every river on this shore. The rock wears patches of orange and gray lichen above the spray line, and the ledges are polished smooth wherever the current runs. Anglers know this spot well, because migrating fish coming up from Lake Superior can climb no farther than these falls. For a place a few steps from a parking area, it feels surprisingly wild. The roar swallows the sound of the highway almost completely. The lava built the rock, but ice carved the scenery. During the last ice age, glaciers more than a mile thick ground across this country, deepening the Great Basin that would hold Lake Superior. When the ice finally melted back, around 10,000 years ago, meltwater pooled against the ice front and formed a lake even higher than today's, which geologists call Glacial Lake Duluth. Its old beach lines still ride the hillsides high above the modern shore. As the water fell step by step toward today's level, rivers like the Beaver had to cut fresh gorges down the newly exposed slope. The falls we are watching are the rivers still finishing that job. From the west bank, you can work along the rim and look straight down the throat of the gorge. The river braids around slabs of fallen rock, gathers in dark pools, then spills again toward the lake, which glitters just beyond the highway bridge. It is only a few hundred yards from here to Lake Superior, so this is truly the river's last mile. Cedar and birch lean over the edge, roots gripping cracks in the basalt. Every North Shore river ends with a flourish like this, but few put their finale so close to the road. This one you can visit in sneakers. Here is a fact that puts tiny Beaver Bay into every geology textbook of the region. The dark, intrusive rocks that shoulder through the lava flows along this coast, the gabbros and diabases that form headlands like Palisade Head and Carlton Peak, are formally known as the Beaver Bay Complex, named by geologists for this very town. Mixed into that complex are pale masses of a rock called anorthosite, a crystal mush of feldspar carried up from deep in the crust. Remember that word, anorthosite, because it is about to sabotage one of the most famous companies in America. On the North Shore, even the rocks have a plot line, and this little bay lent its name to all of it. Down at water level, the river shows its patient side. Where the current spins pebbles in one spot for centuries, it drills smooth, round potholes into solid rock, and you can find them here stranded high and dry from wilder eras of flow. The pools between ledges hold that root beer-colored water foam lines tracing slow spirals on the surface. On a warm July afternoon, it is all very gentle, spray drifting, gulls overhead, the lake breathing cool air up the gorge. It is worth remembering that everything smooth in this scene was made by violence. 10,000 springs of flood did the sculpting. The Beaver River retires into the grandest body of fresh water on Earth. Lake Superior is the largest freshwater lake in the world by surface area, roughly 31,700 square miles, holding about 10% of all the fresh surface water on the planet. It is cold enough that even in July, swimmers rarely last more than minutes, and deep enough to swallow a 50-story building with ease. The lake makes its own weather, fog banks in summer, ferocious gales in November. Every story in this episode, the settlers, the mail carrier, the miners, happens on the rim of this inland sea. The Ojibwe called it Gichigami, the Great Lake, and no one has improved on the description. From the right spot, you can see the whole system at once: falls behind, gorge around, and the bright plate of Superior filling the horizon downstream. The bay itself curls behind a rocky point, one of the few natural harbors of refuge on this stretch of coast, which is precisely why a town grew here. Watch the water change color where river meets lake, tan and brown feathering into glacial blue. On calm days it is a painting, on stormy days it is a warning. Sailors have read this shoreline for centuries, looking for exactly this kind of shelter. That search for shelter is how Beaver Bay's human story begins. Long before any town, this coast ran on fur. Beaver were abundant in these streams and ponds, and beaver pelts were the currency that pulled French and British traders across the Great Lakes in the 1700s and 1800s. Canoe brigades worked this shore between posts, hauling trade goods one way and bales of fur the other, with the great depot at Grand Portage farther up the coast. A bay with good shelter and a beaver-rich river practically named itself. When surveyors drew their maps, Beaver Bay was simply the name that stuck. It is a plain name, but it carries the whole first economy of the North Shore inside it. In 1856, a schooner put ashore here carrying German immigrant families, among them 5 brothers named Wieland, sons of Carl Christian Wieland. Christian Wieland, a surveyor by trade, had spotted this river mouth and judged it a perfect place for a sawmill. While other early North Shore town sites boomed and then emptied out completely, Beaver Bay held on through every hard winter that followed. That stubbornness earned it the title it still carries, the oldest continuously settled town on Minnesota's North Shore. Everything else on this coast, every resort and harbor village, is younger. It all started a few steps from where we are standing. Somewhere along these lower banks, the Wieland sawmill went to work, powered by the same river that is entertaining us today. Picture this quiet gorge filled with the scream of saw blades, the smell of fresh cut pine, and log booms riding the bay. There is little trace of the mill left now. The forest has taken back its ground. But for half a century, lumber was the engine of this town, with commercial fishing running alongside it. By 1866, the settlement had grown enough to serve as the seat of government for all of Lake County. Not bad for a village clinging to a rock coast at the edge of a wilderness. The Wielands built a genuine frontier enterprise here, cutting the big white pine and cedar of the Beaver River country and shipping lumber out by water. Their operations eventually reached lumber yards in Duluth and even Port Arthur on the Canadian shore. Supply schooners and small steamers were the lifeline, because for decades no road worth the name reached this coast at all, and in early years even the mail came on foot or by boat. The county seat later moved down the shore to 2 harbors when the railroad era reshaped everything. The Great Pines went the way of great pines everywhere, but the town the lumber built refused to disappear. Working back upstream, you get the falls from their best angle, looking up the staircase as the whole river comes down at you. Each shelf throws its own curtain of white, and between them the water slides in glassy sheets over rock the color of charcoal. In the mist zones, moss and wildflowers crowd every crack, little hanging gardens fed by permanent spray. You can feel the concussion of the big ledge through your boot soles before you can see it. Photographers chase these falls in every season: autumn colors, winter ice sculptures, spring fury. Summer might be the sleeper pick. You can get close enough to feel the breath of the river. Anishinaabe Ojibwe people knew and used this shore for generations before any sawmill, and an Ojibwe community remained part of Beaver Bay life through the settlement years. Families with names like Beargrease, Wishoop, and Blue Sky living and working alongside the newcomers. From that community came the North Shore's most celebrated figure. John Beargrease, son of the leader Maquabimitum, was born around 1858. And beginning in 1879, he and his brothers carried the mail along this roadless coast between two harbors and Grand Marais. By dogsled in winter and boat in summer, hauling loads of several hundred pounds, he made his fastest run in about 28 hours and kept the settlements connected for 20 years, until his last delivery in 1899. He died in 1910 and rests in the cemetery above this town. Every winter, mushers race almost 400 miles from Duluth toward Grand Portage in the John Beargrease Sled Dog Marathon, still carrying his name up the shore he once served. Watch what the river does in the narrow places, gathering itself, going glassy and muscular, then exploding white at the bottom of the chute. Hydraulics like these are why log drivers had the most dangerous job of the lumber era, riding timber through exactly this kind of water. The gorge concentrates everything: sound, spray, cold air, into a corridor a few yards wide. Stand here long enough and the roar stops being noise and becomes something more like weather. It is the sound this spot has made, louder or softer, every day for 10,000 years. The highway above carries thousands of people past it daily, and the river does not care at all. When the pine thinned out, Lake Superior itself became the paycheck. Commercial fishing grew into Beaver Bay's second industry, part of a shore-wide fishery in which hundreds of small operations, many run by Scandinavian immigrant families, set nets from open wooden skiffs. Herring was the bread and butter catch, salted into kegs or shipped fresh on the steamers that worked this coast like a bus line. It was cold, dangerous work in one of the moodiest bodies of water on Earth. The fishery faded in the mid-1900s as lake trout crashed and markets changed. But you can still meet its memory in every smoked fish shop along Highway 61. Between cascades, the river spreads across broad shelves where you can walk almost to midstream in low water. These slabs are single lava flows, planed off by ice and floods, cracked into neat polygons like old pavement. Families picnic here on summer afternoons, feet in the pools, while the main current slides past a few feet away. It is a friendly scene with a serious undertone, because North Shore rivers rise fast and their rock turns slick in an instant. The locals treat this water with the same respect they give the lake. That respect was learned the hard way, as the next part of the story shows. In late November of 1905, a monstrous blizzard swung its winds onto Lake Superior and caught the iron ore fleet in open water. In that single storm, more than 24 vessels were wrecked or damaged, and Duluth crowds watched the steamer Matoffa break apart on the harbor entrance with sailors freezing in the rigging. The disaster gave the storm its name, the Matoffa Storm, and it exposed how blind this rocky coast was at night, with barely a light burning between Duluth and the border. Ship owners demanded action, and Congress answered. The answer would be built on a cliff just 5 miles down the shore from Beaver Bay. By 1910, engineers had hoisted materials up a 130-foot cliff and raised Split Rock Lighthouse, whose beacon began sweeping the lake that summer. Everything came up from the water by derrick and hoist. Because there was still no road, the keepers themselves arrived by boat. The light warned mariners off this magnetic, compass-fooling stretch of coast for nearly 6 decades. Today it is one of the most photographed lighthouses in the United States, restored as a state historic site inside a state park. Beaver Bay sits closer to it than any other town. Its beam is retired, but on memorial nights it still swings across the water like a ghost of 1910. Here is the strange charm of this place, a genuinely dramatic waterfall performing directly beneath a federal highway. The bridge frames the Upper Cascades like a proscenium arch, and you can feel trucks drumming overhead while whitewater detonates below. Waysides like this are a North Shore specialty, where the road and the wilderness are separated by nothing but a guardrail. Generations of family road trips have pulled over here for exactly the view we are getting. The river was here 1 billion years before the bridge, give or take, and it will outlast every bridge that follows. For now, they share the gorge politely. Now for the best failure story in American business, and it begins right up the shore. In 1902, 5 businessmen in 2 harbors founded the Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing Company to mine what they believed was corundum, a mineral almost as hard as diamond and precious to grinding wheel makers, from a deposit at Crystal Bay a few miles northeast of here. They dug, they shipped, and then came the awful discovery: the rock was not corundum at all. It was a northocite, that same feldspar-rich rock of the Beaver Bay complex we met earlier, and as an abrasive, it was nearly worthless. The company was mining the wrong mineral on the edge of bankruptcy. Most ventures would have died right there. Instead, new backers Edgar Ober and Lucius Ordway took over in 1905, moved the operation to Duluth, and pointed the company at making sandpaper instead of mining rock. From that pivot, slowly and painfully, grew the giant the world knows as 3M, the maker of masking tape, Scotch tape, and Post-it notes. The corporate legend literally begins with a failed mine on the North Shore, a few minutes' drive from these falls. It moved to St. Paul in 1910 and never looked back. Think about that as you watch the river grind its own abrasives out of the same stubborn rock. The most valuable thing ever mined at Crystal Bay turned out to be a lesson. Above the main drops the river comes hustling out of the forest already in a hurry, breaking white around boulders the size of cars. Somewhere up in those woods, it has already gathered its east and west branches, and drained miles of swamp and highland, all of it funneled toward this final staircase. The Superior Hiking Trail, the famous footpath that runs more than 300 miles along this shore from near Duluth to the Canadian border, crosses the Beaver River drainage in the hills above town. Up there, the river is an anonymous woodland stream. Down here, with an audience, it becomes a performer. Same water, better lighting. For its first 70 years, Beaver Bay's only real connection to the world was water. That changed in the 1920s when the Lakeshore Road, today's Highway 61, was finally pushed through along the coast, blasted across rock points and bridged over river after river. The road turned an isolated fishing and lumber coast into one of America's classic scenic drives, and tourism has been the North Shore's rising industry ever since. Resorts, smoked fish stands, and wayside overlooks followed the pavement. Bob Dylan, a Duluth boy, later fixed the road's name into music history with Highway 61 revisited. Every visitor who pulls over at these falls is living in the world that road created. Look up at the Gorge Walls and you can see the whole episode in cross-section. Hard lava shoulders above, ice-smoothed faces below, and the river still busy at the bottom of it all. Cedar trees older than the state of Minnesota grip these ledges, dwarfed and twisted by wind off the lake. Ravens patrol the rim, and in winter, ice climbers come to test the frozen curtains that build on the north-facing walls. It is a compact little canyon, but it concentrates everything people drive up this shore to feel. Stone, water, forest, and the cold breath of the biggest lake on Earth. All of it 2 minutes from a parking lot. Beaver Bay has one more industrial chapter, and it is barely 3 miles up the road. In the early 1950s, the Reserve Mining Company built an enormous plant on the shore to process taconite, a low-grade iron ore railed in 60 miles from Babbitt, and the workers' new town was at first simply called the Beaver Bay Housing Project. On the 1st of May, 1954, it took its own name, Silver Bay, and grew into the first taconite town in America. The plant, run today by Cleveland Cliffs as North Shore Mining, still turns taconite into iron pellets for the steel mills. Its old lakeshore tailings even created Black Beach, a striking dark sand cove that finally opened to the public in 2015. The oldest town on the shore ended up godparent to one of the newest. Modern Beaver Bay is a village of about 120 people with a gift for outliving eras. Fir, pine, fish, and ore have all come and gone beneath it. It holds the title of oldest continuously settled town on the North Shore, and wears it lightly. A cluster of shops and cafes serving the endless summer stream of Highway 61 travelers. It even collects history. The wooden water tower in town was built for a railroad village called Markville, moved here in 1956, and supplied the town's water clear until 1982. The Beargrease name still appears on local memorials, and the sled dog marathon still passes through each winter. Small places on this shore do not vanish. They compost their old industries into stories. Beaver Bay is the proof. We climb out of the gorge with the roar fading behind us and Lake Superior flashing through the trees. One short stop on Highway 61, gave us a billion-year-old lava staircase, the oldest town on the shore, a mail carrier whose name outruns most governors, and the failed mine that accidentally founded 3M, that is the North Shore's magic. The history here is stacked as thick as the lava flows. You just have to pull over and walk down to it. If you pass Beaver Bay, give the river 10 minutes. It has been rehearsing this show for 10,000 years. Thank you for watching. Follow for more of the trails of the world.